Well, g'day guys, it's Jeff Adam here, and welcome to our Australia virtual vacation, discovering the wonder of travelling down under. I got to say, this whole presentation has come together for the generosity of our travel advisor mates. Travel advisors from around the country, from the USA and Canada, have come together to put this presentation on, and they asked me to give it, to put it out there for you. So I want to kind of start off by just giving you an insight into Australia and the USA. You see, Australia and the USA is pretty much the same size. And looking here at this map, one of the flaws that people make is when they first think they're going to head down to Australia, going to arrive in Sydney, they think they're going to grab a car, and Sydney's about where Florida crosses the map there, and they're going to grab a car and they're going to drive out and see that big rock in the centre of Australia. Well, that's like driving from Florida to Denver. That's a big day. The beautiful thing about Australia is we've got great domestic services. We've got amazing ways in which to get around by rail, by touring coach, and also personal driving yourself. And I'll run through some of these as we go through this presentation. What I wanted to touch on first, though, was the fact that we've promised you a little kit, and this kit is going to be made available to you through your travel advisor. You all have been invited by travel advisors to attend, and when you registered, you would have put your travel advisor's name and their agency name. And in doing so, when you finish this presentation, you'll be contacting them, and they will send out your travel planner, your map, and also a little fair dinkum Aussie dictionary, so you know how to speak when you're down under. If you have not done so, please contact them and let them know that you're keen to follow up and you'd like this sent to them, because they'll actually have a kit for you. And I've got to say, the travel advisors, hats off. They have done a marvellous job. You think about what we're going through right now. Right now, there's been this horrible embargo on travel. Well, the first people to get hit were the people who were overseas. And it was the travel advisors that were the first to stand up and look after their clients who were trapped overseas. If you booked online, if you booked through some faceless online business, well, guess what? You are out of luck. But people who have booked through travel advisors, they had peace of mind. They received great customer service. They would have been able to maximise their budget when they put their itinerary together, and they would have been given better choices. And the whole process is a time-saving exercise. The travel advisors do a marvellous job of bringing it all together. It's all about personal service, great insights and expertise, and then it's presented in a document. They give wonderful assistance with regards to documents, and then at the same time too, they are your advocate. So for people who were trapped overseas, they found their travel advisors standing tall and looking after them. And for all this, it's free. Yes, I got to say, an Australian expression we've got for people like our travel advisors is mates. And we call them a mate because a mate is a person who makes Australia travel easy. And that's exactly what our travel advisor mates do for us. Working with them makes it so much easier to kind of pull all this stuff together. Now, I've got to tell you, when you head down to Australia, there is a funny language. I mean, it is English, but there is a bit of Aussie inflection. And I've got to quickly walk through here. Imagine you down there, you want to buy some opals. And you spot this beautiful black opal back opal necklace, and your first thing you do when you walk in is you say g'day. Of course, that's a pretty standard greeting in Australia. That means hello. Everywhere you go, g'day mate, how you going? G'day, g'day. Then the word Emma-chizit. Emma-chizit. Have you heard that word before? Emma-chizit? Well, maybe it will make more sense now. How much is it? Yeah, Australians they kind of combine words. So here, when you go to a shop, you're going to buy something, you say Emma-chizit, mate, and then the answer, it's a bit expensive, and of course you're shocked by it, and that's why you'd say crikey. The price was a bit high, you go crikey. In other words, that's an expression of surprise. When it comes to shopping, typically, yes, the price is what you get. But when it comes to opals, they tend to negotiate a bit. The opal dealers, they've got a bit of room in there to negotiate. So perhaps after negotiating, you kind of then ask the question. After you've surprised, you might turn around and say, fair dinkum. That's a question where you're kind of saying, is that your best price? And then he kind of scratches his chin and he goes, oh, I could probably do this for you. And you go, Ripper. Now, Ripper is like, that's fantastic. And bloody Ripper means very fantastic. Or it means so you Ripper is just basically expression. The word Ripper is used to say it's fantastic. You're pretty happy. So to pay for it, you're going to dip your hand into your skyrocket. What's your skyrocket? Your skyrocket's your pocket. You've got to get in your pocket, pull out your wallet, and pay with a credit card. When you travel in Australia, you find that credit cards are used everywhere. The currency exchange rate is very good as well, so you're going to find that it's honestly the best way to go. And then when you're walking out that door, you'll hold that prize in your hand up high, and you'll shout out the loudest voice, "You bloody beauty," which means you're very happy. That's very good. So yeah, you might. That's just an example of some Aussie speak. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to touch on words, and I'll hopefully will get you a little closer to speaking Australian. Let's start off, though, by looking at Australia in terms of its population. It's 25 million. It's made up of 6 states and 2 territories. You've got Western Australia, South Australia, you've got Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. The 2 territories are the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory, which is home to Canberra. Now, getting to Australia, of course, is the first step. And we kind of promote this we're from down under thing. And I think sometimes it backfires on us because people think it's a long way. Well, it's not that far. And our airlines, our international airlines like Qantas and Air New Zealand, and there's a whole array of great airlines that will just bring it so much closer. And the service they give on board. In fact, the lift is getting better as well. On the books, they're going to open up flights direct from New York to Sydney. They're talking about flights they've got flights in Chicago, out of Denver and Dallas and San Francisco and Los Angeles. So there's some really good lift now to get you down there. And we like to say it's 2 meals, 2 movies, a nap, and you're there. When you arrive, there's some great domestic airlines which then link it all together. Having said that, I know a lot of Americans don't mind driving, and as a self-drive destination, it's a lot of fun. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest to do the whole of Australia on self-drive, but you might do portions of it. The thing you've got to remember, though, is left is right and right is wrong, and you'll be fine. It's not hard to do it, I can promise you. Another thing you could do, of course, is couple up with some local guides. We've got some local guides who've got a real passion and understanding for the areas they promote, and you can get out and do some beautiful regional tours, which will really connect you with the bush and the wildlife and the cultural experience of the Australian people. Then there's some great guided exchanges as well, where you can do guided tours, ranging in size from small groups up to large groups. We can organise those as well. And let's not forget rail travel or train travel. Train can link us through, and the beautiful thing is lots of Aussies like to travel on trains. So starting off in New South Wales, population of 8 million. Sydney itself is about 5 million people. And Sydney's been voted by readers of Condé Nast and Travel and Leisure as like one of the #1 cities in the world. You're looking down here upon the Sydney Harbour Bridge, also referred to as the Big Coat Hanger, and it's quite impressive. And I've got to say, the area it falls in here is the Rocks, which is a lovely historic area, cobblestone streets, and lots of colonial heritage here, convict heritage. This is a circular quay where daily commuters arrive on ferries to go into this bustling metropolis to go to work. And out on Bennelong Point, you've got the beautiful Sydney Opera House, the iconic Sydney Opera House, and behind that, fabulous Botanic Gardens, which was formerly the Convict Gardens when Australia was first settled. Yeah, we got our start because America had a little tea party up in Boston, and the Brits got kicked out, but they had to send their convicts somewhere, so voila, this is where we ended up. One of the most beautiful cities in the world, Sydney. Well, it's come a long way since those early days, that's for sure. And walking down through the Rocks, you'll actually get a chance to experience some of that colonial heritage. You'll see the lovely old pubs, some of the oldest pubs in Australia, some great food and fare. The markets are fabulous. To wander through the markets on a Friday and a Saturday, they go off like a frog in a sock. I've got to tell you, so much fun. Great souvenirs, great food. One thing I'll highly recommend: when you go to a place like Sydney, where there's a body of water, you need to get out on that water to get your bearings. It's like being in New York or Seattle or even Chicago, where you've got water in front of you. If you can get out the water, you just kind of get a feel for where things are at. Now, you can do that with a captain cook or a small ship cruise. Some of those small ship cruises are fabulous because you get a chance to kind of, with a local, it's called cruising with a local. And you'll have a little barbecue on the back and a nice cleansing ale as you're gliding under the harbour bridge and past the Opera House and getting some spectacular photos like this one here. Now, the Opera House itself is quite the draw, and it's something that you need to talk to your travel advisor about before you go. Apart from just doing behind-the-scenes tours and maybe a nice little tour and tasting plate, they can also involve taking you to see some of the shows, because inside the Opera House, it's really, truly spectacular. And it's not just about opera either. It's all sorts of performance arts and comedies and theatre and mud wrestling. They'll do anything to get an audience in this place, I can tell you. Sydney itself does like to celebrate. And of course, with the year we're having in 2020, I got to think that Sydney's New Year celebration at the end of this year is going to be pretty big. I think the world looks forward to seeing what Sydney's going to put on. And we have an amazing this fireworks display. It's timed to music. As Americans, Canadians right now, if you're thinking or ever thought about going to Sydney for New Year's Eve, this is going to be the year to go. There should be plenty of space. There should be some good pricing. And I got to say, talk to your travel advisors. If you're interested, they'll put you on the list for any specials that are coming out too. Sydney itself basks in this beautiful sunshine. Even in winter, the average temperature is about 60 degrees. And here, sitting outside our fresco dining, some wonderful fare, sitting out there eating prawns, which are like shrimp on steroids, as big as your arm. And maybe after a nice meal, you might want to go for a little walk. Now, a highlight of Sydney is definitely the bridge climb. And the bridge climb is best done at sunset and sunrise. But if you've ever timed a sunset and sunrise, they don't last that long. So I'd highly recommend you organise this early, otherwise you won't get these magic photographs. Another way to see Sydney, because getting up high is good, but getting on a Sydney Harbour seaplane, leaving from Rose Bay, the oldest airstrip in Australia, it will take you out over the Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, and then out along the beautiful beaches of Australia. There's Dee Why, Curl, and Manly Beach, named after manly men that Captain Cook saw when he first sailed into Botany Bay. Now, in the background of this photograph, that's where the city is back here. So this is actually the route a ferry might take us. That's one of the ferries there. Coming out, they'll park it, then you'll walk through here. You've got little fish and chip shops. You've got little cafes. Manly Beach, yes, the home of the manly men. Captain Cook, course, when he first arrived here, he actually saw these manly Aboriginal men and he named it Manly Beach. There's also Bondi Beach, which is the birthplace of the Australian surf lifesaver. Now, these surf lifesavers actually volunteer to make our beaches safe. And if you want to meet them, you can kind of wander down and say good day. They're real friendly. This bloke here's probably a doctor. This one here's probably a chippy, a sparky. This one over here's a sparky. This one here's a bricky. Now, does that make any sense to you? And they're wearing budgie smugglers. Are you with me? Okay, here we go. A chippy is a carpenter, chipping away. A sparky, electrician. A bricky is a bricklayer. And budgie smugglers, well, they're guys' swimsuits. And a budgie is like a little parakeet. So, yes, I'll leave that to the imagination. But Australians are always making fun of themselves. And here, you get a chance to go surfing with Australian surf lifesavers. And the guys we work with here are fabulous. They'll take you to the oldest surf lifesaving club in Australia. I mean, when you think about the two strongest surfing nations in the world, USA and Australia. So why not get down here and have a surf with some Aussies? Speaking of great Aussies, imagine this. You're in this bustling metropolis of Sydney, and this Aussie girl with a nice smile picks you up in a four-wheel drive vehicle, and before you know it, you're scampering up into the bush. You're about an hour and a half in, and you make this look out where you're looking out over what's called Jamison Valley. Now, this area is called the Blue Mountains because it's covered in eucalyptus trees, and these eucalyptus trees permeate the atmosphere with fine droplets of oil. So you get this lovely grey-blue haze in all your photographs. And you're looking there at the Three Sisters overlooking Jamison Valley. It's like the Grand Canyon through here, but it's covered in trees. And then you'll find this little clearing and stop for a morning tea. Have an Anzac bicky. A bicky is also referred to as a biscuit or a cookie. And Anzac stands for Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. So here you are, those cookies. Mothers would make these cookies back in the First World War. They'd be boxed up and they'd be sent off to war. They would take 6 months on a boat to get out to find the sons and that were stuck out there in the trenches. And those cookies, they're yummy as. And I guess we'll be talking about Anzac a little while because on the 25th of this month, this Saturday is Anzac Day. But there you are with kangaroos bouncing around. You've got cockatoos or cocky, and of course you've got a chance to visit a local wildlife sanctuary too. See, a lot of the Australian wildlife, some of it is actually nocturnal. So to really get a chance to see it is to go to a wildlife sanctuary. And the beautiful thing about these sanctuaries now is they're actually giving back, and they kind of put part proceeds towards planting eucalypt trees to kind of give these koalas some more food and places to live and shelter. North of Sydney, about an hour and a half, is a fabulous Hunter Valley where winemakers believe life is just too short to make bad wine. It's up here that you can actually take on some festivals. They've got a fabulous food and wine festival, for example, right in the middle middle of like June, July, and it's a great chance to come up here and meet up with winemakers and restaurateurs. They put on a great fair. Aussies are showing off. When they have a chance to put on a festival, that's when they're showing off. And if you've got funny accents, because you do, you've all got funny accents, so you've got to use those American accents when you're there, because Aussies are so keen to kind of talk to you, and they'll be very keen, especially after this year, let me tell you. Going north of there's a great drive you can do up the coast of Australia. It goes all the way to Brisbane, but halfway there, before you get across into Queensland, stop into Byron Bay. Byron Bay is one of the most quintessential Australian beach towns, and it's this lovely scene of surfing and sand. It's also a home to some great events like the Byron Bay Blues Festival. It's been running for over 30 years, and the whole of Australia, the whole of the world comes to this festival. The accommodations, everything from 5-star to teepees and all sorts of acts. If you've got any interest in music, this is truly an amazing thing to be a part of. Then going to Canberra. Canberra is our capital. It was actually designed by an American architect called Walter Burley Griffin from Chicago. We named that lake there Lake Burley Griffin. That's Old Parliament House, and that's New Parliament House. And see the lawn going up the side of it? Well, here in Canberra, we're surrounded by bush and mountains, and often here kangaroos will come hopping down into Canberra. So right on sunset, you'll see kangaroos, and right on sunrise. It's here, like your Washington, D.C., that you get to see some of the war memorials, you get to see some of our museums. One significant one for American clients is often here, the Australian War Memorial, because this is where you'll get a chance to get an insight into how Australia and America have fought together over the years. In fact, it all started back in the First World War. When in the First World War, Australian menfolk were already engaged in Europe, and America came in late, and of course they fought under Australian command. In the Second World War, you return the favour, and in the Second World War, Australian menfolk were in Europe again, but we had nobody to kind of man and look after home. So MacArthur came down, and the battles of the South Pacific and the Coral Sea were fought from Australian soil. And since then, Australia's been involved in every skirmish, every war. Vietnam, Korea, we're like a little yappy dog behind it, next to our mates, our American mates. And I've got to say, going back to the Second World War, when one of these dapper, handsome American men came down to Australia, well, they actually met up with some very handsome Australian women. And there were something like 15,000 Australian war brides actually departed the Australian shore for the USA after the Second World War. There was a train that was put on called the Bridal Train that picked up brides from Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and took them up to Brisbane, and they boarded ships to head back to, one of the ships was called the Monterey. The US government put the ship on. Going down to Victoria, and Victoria itself, they say in the next few years it will actually succeed Sydney in terms of size. The population of Melbourne is 4.8 million currently, and Melbourne is this wonderful melting pot of humanity, the largest population of Greeks outside of Athens. You've got Vietnamese, Chinese, Italian. It's just a hive of activity. I love Melbourne. It's got a vibe to it, and it's just hard to promote. People come to Melbourne and say this is their favourite city. Walking through the streets of Melbourne, you'll find this fabulous cafe culture. And I've got to say, Starbucks has only failed in 2 cities in the world. One was Rome, you can understand that. The other was Melbourne, because Melbourne's coffee is so good. And these laneways and arcades are just divine. And a little 2-3 hour wander through these laneways and arcades, tasting tea houses and stopping at patisseries and trying coffee, and it's the way to go. Melbourne itself has got some fabulous restaurants as well, and it also celebrates some wonderful food and wine festivals as well. So again, I point these festivals out because they can be nicely timed in to a great itinerary if you've got interest. So can sport too. Aussies like our sport. In fact, when you think of the strongest tennis nations in the world, when it comes to Davis Cup, it's USA number 1, it's Australia number 2. And here, the Australian Tennis Open in January starts off the calendar year for that Grand Slam circuit. So if you're interested in this, we can also assist you in pulling some stuff together with your travel advisor. There's also the Grand Prix for those people who are into motor racing. The actual Grand Prix season starts in Australia. This is the first race for the year, for the calendar year. Then there's the Melbourne Cup, the biggest horse race in the Southern Hemisphere. The whole of Australia stops for this race. Australians love to gamble. We'll bet on 2 flies walking up a wall. We love our horse racing. And then there's Aussie rules football, where no rules are right. The big men fly high. 100,000 people at the stadium here. Everybody stands up and roars. You can feel the vibrations in your chest. Your sustenance to take on this day will be a pig's ear and a dog's eye with some dead horse. Okay, quickly, let's explain that. Well, there they are, pie and a beer. So you got a beer, a pig's ear, a dog's eye, a meat pie. Dead horse is sauce or ketchup. I think I've lost you, haven't I? Stay with me, stay with me. That food is fantastic. When you're down there, one thing you probably want to be wary of is cricket. They can play this game for 4 days and not get a result. I mean, why bother? It's like baseball on Valium. I must admit, they've got some better games now where they do 2020s. You have one-day games now. But one sport that does travel well for a lot of Americans is golf, and you'll always find somebody to play golf with in Australia. Yes, golfing with kangaroos. You'll find kangaroos, actually a lot of golf courses in Australia, because the golf course is back onto national park, and so kangaroos will come through. But I got to recommend going with a local guide. Like here, Janine, who's from a Kid in a Walkabout, she'll take you on this wonderful koalas and kangaroos in the wild tour. Walking on foot, you'll get so close to wildlife, and you'll learn so much from somebody like Janine. She truly is a great kangaroo savant, you might say. She's got her finger on the pulse. And then there's a place like Hillsville Sanctuary, where you can wander through this sanctuary, and there's one point you can go and hand feed baby platypus. Now, this is something that books out really early, but this is an egg-laying marsupial. It's got a bill like a duck, and it's got a little taser in there, tail like a beaver, and you can hand feed little worms by wading in the water. Again, you need to talk to your travel advisor, get yourself organised for that, because that books out. Now, Melbourne itself is surrounded by some great vineyards, and the Yarra Valley is one of my favourites. It also is a draw here from Melbourne. It's Phillip Island. Phillip Island, right on sunset, you head down for what's called the Penguin Parade. Because right on sunset, just like clockwork, up to 2,000 little penguins start marching up the beach. They'll do it in small groups. They don't get taken by foxes and owls. Another great trip out of Melbourne is to hop on the Great Ocean Road and do a little drive out to check out the shipwreck coast. And it's along this journey you'll see koalas and kangaroos. You'll get a chance to spot the 12 apostles, which should be called the 11 apostles because one's gone swimming and hasn't come back yet. Heading across the border into South Australia, Adelaide's where I'm from, population of 1.3 million people in Adelaide, and the whole of South Australia is about 1.5 million. Adelaide itself, we're actually free settlers in Adelaide. We were designed by Colonel Light. All the other cities were convict settled. We were free settled. And the city centre itself is one of the most perfectly designed cities. It's got a parkland, a mile of parkland surrounding the entire city centre. And right in the heart of that city itself is the Adelaide Central Market. And the Adelaide Central Market, I just love going to a good market. The din. I mean, food is the essence of life. And to wander through, hear people talking and banter and all that, just having fun, people laughing, buying and selling food, the pungent aroma of fish and poultry and the heady smells. I mean, it's just fabulous, just fabulous. And to wander through with a guide like Mark Gleeson here is a great experience, to meet up with the locals and chat and use your funny accents. It's fun. And the city itself has got gorgeous Cultural Boulevard, North Terrace, where you've got art galleries and museums and a beautiful collective of Indigenous art as well. And 20 minutes from the city, you can be up in the bush, up at Cleveland Wildlife Park and cuddling a koala. Now, you can only cuddle a koala in 2 states. There's this one, and I'll show you the next one soon. But here, Cleveland Wildlife Park, once you've left here, head across to Harndorf, little German village. My family lives here. A lot of German heritage in Harndorf, and belly up to the bar and enjoy a nice ale. And people are real friendly. Heading up to the Barossa Valley, which also has some German heritage. Do you realise that South Australia produces something like 60% of the wine that comes to the USA from Australia? And the Barossa Valley would be Australia's wine capital, that area without doubt. I mean, the Barossa Valley is where I used to live, and winemakers here are just fabulous. And some of the wines, the one wine that probably has put Australian wine on the path to glory, and that is the Penfolds Grange Hermitage. There's only been 4 winemakers. Max Schubert was the first winemaker to make the Grange. It's like drinking liquid velvet. It constantly gets very high 90s to 100 in its wine ratings. And the people in the Barossa, they live farm to plate. Their food is coming from locally. You've got great gourmet weekends, food, wine, and great life. Speaking of great life, head across to Kangaroo Island. Now, the Kangaroo Island was actually split from mainland Australia, they say 10,000 years ago. And the Aboriginal people left pretty much straight away. So the kangaroos over here don't really understand what humans are all about. In fact, when I was working for Tourism South Australia, I actually had a kangaroo hop in my car. Now, the only way to get a kangaroo out of your car is to open up the other door and make him hop all the way through. It's kind of incredible. Kangaroo Island itself is very much, it's like Australia's Galapagos. Now, we have had a little fire that kind of went through there, and I'm sure you heard a lot about it. The unfortunate thing, there's a lot of misinformation because less than 2% of Australia was actually affected by the fires. And the wildlife, while it has been, was hurt, you'll find it's bouncing back, as I'd like to say. You'll find trees like the Banksia, they only actually release their seeds under intense heat. They need like 500 degrees. So a bushfire comes through, the Banksia opens up the seeds, and the seeds become food for the local birds, plus they also become a new growth that you'll see, the regrowth. And the Australian bush has an incredible way of bouncing back. The trees will start, and you'll have shoots out of these trees. A lot of wildlife will come back. Species that we haven't seen for a while all of a sudden will come back. And a local guide like Craig Wickham here, will take you out on a fabulous tour, checking out, in small group touring, to these very eco-sensitive areas where you get a chance to see Tamar wallabies. You get a chance to head to Cygnet River and check out the local black swans, or maybe head across and spot koalas in trees. Now, it's not an easy thing, and that's why a local guide's important. It's also good to know that Craig actually happens to be pretty good on a barbie, as any good Australian is. And he puts out some nice whiting fillets, a little bit of dash of wine over there, and some mushrooms barbecued. And I've got to tell you, a barbie out amongst red gums, the smell of the bush, the sounds of the bush, the kookaburras laughing. All of a sudden, he hears this noise. He says, "Follow me." And you come face to face with a little echidna. Now, the echidna is an egg-laying marsupial. It's called a monotreme. It's like a dinosaur. They've evolved over millions of years, and just quite phenomenal. Their relative, of course, is the platypus. And there he'll take you down to Seal Bay on this beautiful white sand beach under the guidance of our local ranger. He'll give you an insight into these Australian sea lions, and you get a chance to see them up close. Now, going north of Adelaide, we head up into the outback. And the outback areas, the Flinders Ranges, provide excellent opportunity to head out and explore. On foot, you can stay in luxury camping. There's some great camping under the stars. There's some lodges up through here. And, of course, it will get you close to wildlife, where you'll get a chance to see big red kangaroo that can grow up to 6 foot high, and in one single bound can pass over 25 feet. Then also up in this area, this outback region, you'll find an area where the men dig holes in ground searching for opal. 80% of the world's opals are coming from this area. And to kind of head up here, a lot of the people actually live underground as well. And you can have that opportunity too. You can stay at the Desert Cave Hotel, run by a mate of mine, Bob Corro, and it actually is as the only true hard rock cafe in the world. We'll move on from there. Let me tell you, to clink all this together, rail is a great way to go. Train service, be it going up through the centre of Australia, up on the Garn, which is called the Garn after the Afghan Cameleers, which takes you up from Adelaide through Alice Springs and Darwin. And you can do just sections, you don't have to do the whole thing. Or you might want to take the Indian Pacific, which takes you from Sydney through Adelaide and Perth. Great rail journeys. The lovely thing about 80% of the people on board are Australians. And Aussies are real chatty and friendly. And as soon as they hear where you're from, all of a sudden you make fast friends. These couple just met on the train. No, I'm only joking, not really. They're travelling together, of course. And yes, they've got great facilities on board these trains. A wonderful service is prevailed. Now, going across to the west, we hit Perth. And Perth has got more millionaires than any other capital city in Australia. Why is that? Well, West Australia, it boasts some amazing mineral wealth. Some of the biggest diamond mines in the world, Argyle Diamond Mine comes to mind. It is actually the biggest in the world. You've got the largest gold mine continuously operating for many years now out at Kalgoorlie. You've got iron ore deposits that you wouldn't believe. And then Broome is actually the pearling capital of the world. It's where the best white pearls are found. So yes, there's a lot of wealth here in West Australia. And Perth itself, population of 2 million people, sits on the sparkling Swan River. It's a delightful city, and you'll find close by Perth, right in the city itself, in the heart of the city, is a beautiful Kings Park. And on display here is an amazing wildflower array. Now, the wildflower season in West Australia is something to behold. I would say from late July, August, September, October, even to early November, they'll have flowers going. In fact, there's some plants that will flower all year round. And to come across here in wildflower season, to see the carpets of colour is truly amazing. It attracts all sorts of bird life as well. And then along the waterfront, you've got a place like Fremantle, which is where the early convicts ships would have come in here. This is where the convicts would have, and here, walking the wharfs, you've got great fish and chip shops. You can kind of catch up with locals, and some great pubs and restaurants down here. It's got a real vibe to it, Fremantle. And then going across from hopping on a little vessel and heading across to Rottnest Island. Now, Rottnest Island has become a fast part of a great itinerary when you go to West Australia. Now, people are actually staying out here now. They've got these wonderful glamping tents out here. But the big draw is just to get out, go snorkeling and swimming. Look at that lovely water. You've got lots of places to snorkel and swim. And, of course, you can cycle around the island. But the big attraction is what they call the happiest marsupial in the world. That's the guy on the left-hand side. That's the quokka. And yes, celebrities are just bending over themselves to get a photograph with the quokka because they love to put a little smile on your face. They are so cute. Now, south of Perth is the Margaret River region. Margaret River is home to the tallest trees in all of Australia, these big Kari forests. It's got some beautiful white sand beaches, some great surfing beaches. Also, there's some great vineyard areas and gourmet wine regions. And so here, gourmet weekends are available, and some special events, of course, occur. So kind of for food and wine lovers, you must come down here. Then there's some incredible rock formations. You've got Wave Rock, which looks like this petrified wave. You've got this place called the Pinnacles, which itself looks like a petrified forest, but it's actually the root remains of a forest that have been petrified. Quite phenomenal. And going north of here, you head to an area called the Coral Coast. And one of the biggest draws of the Coral Coast is definitely the Ningaloo Reef. And here you can head out, you can walk in the water, as you can see there, and bang, you're all of a sudden surrounded by coral. And there's all sorts of marine interactions here. You've got whale sharks, you've got humpback whales, you've got dugongs, manta rays, sea turtles. And there's a great company called Exmouth Dive that does a fabulous job of getting you a little closer to that experience. Then going further north, you've got the lovely town of Broome, which is definitely the pearling capital, and it's here you can hop on a camel and do a lovely walk along Cable Beach to the sunsets. It's just phenomenal, pristine. And when you're walking from this part north, it's called the Kimberley. And the Kimberley is really Australia's last frontier. And it's up through here, there's a place called the Horizontal Waterfall, where the waters rush at such a rate out on a dropping tide, they come out sideways. And there's places like the Bungle Bungles, which were only discovered back in the 70s. You know, amazing to think that these places have only been found in recent times. That's the nature of Australia. It's such a big country with most of the population based on the east coast. So parts up through here, they do call it Australia's last frontier. And you'll be going to areas where not many Australians have been. A company that does a great job here is True North. This is luxury small ship cruising. This is adventure cruising. I got to think that after this current debacle we're going through right now, people seeking out cruising are probably going to seek out this style of cruise because it offers small grouping and, of course, getting to remote safe regions. I think this is going to be popular. We actually have a fabulous brochure we've got together, and our travel advisors are ready to take your call should you need help with that. Northern Territory, Darwin. Back in the Second World War, Darwin had more bombs dropped on than Pearl Harbor. And then Alice Springs, Uluru, that's called the Red Centre, and that's the Red Centre of Australia. The top end there, though, Darwin, population of 140,000, I should say, 140,000 people. Darwin's an amazing city. The beautiful middle beach markets. It's very close to Asia, so you get a lot of Asian influences. In fact, walking through the market here, you get a bowl of Malaysian laksa and just have a nice cleansing ale. People are so friendly, so real. Speaking of real, getting out with a local guide. This is what I highly recommend doing, like an outback safari, and there's some great guides operating through here. Look at his face. Look at that smile. See his eyes. You can tell he's a cheeky bugger, but he's a lot of fun, and he's safe, and he'll get you to places you would never dream of going. And she's like your personal valet, making sure everything runs smoothly, looking after your meals. She's 2 steps ahead of you and 3 steps ahead of him, and together they make a great team. Getting you to places like the Kakadu National Park. Out here on a yellow waters cruise. This is a World Heritage Wetland National Park. And so you'll be out here on this vessel that will take you past pandanus palms, and you'll kind of go through this whole Melaleuca forest, and you'll see all sorts of bird life. Over 400 different species of birds, like our friend here, the jabiru, seeking out its breakfast. And maybe you'll spot 1 or 2 of these guys, the crocodile. Now, there's 2 types of croc. There's the ones that eat you, the ones that don't. That's all you need to know. Now, the ones that don't eat you, they're the freshwater crocs. The salties, they're the ones that can get up to 20 foot long, and they can stay underwater waiting for vibrations, and they can come up and as soon as they sense it, they can grab you and drag you in. We can give you the opportunity to stay inside a crocodile. the Kakadu Crocodile Hotel. And you actually do drive into the mouth of the crocodile. This is a 4-star hotel. You drive to the mouth here, under his watchful eye. That's where you've got the actual reception area. You sleep in his stomach. That's in the restaurants. You eat in the restaurants area, and you sleep in his warm belly. So it's a great hotel. But no, we can step it up. You can go even better at the wild bush luxury of Bamaroo Plains. That accommodation there is giving you 180-degree views through that cloth that kind of encases your room, and it's sitting right there before you. Wildlife wandering past your door. You can then hop on these airboats, and it's a true photographer's paradise as you go through this area of these wetland national parks, and you'll see agile wallabies out there boxing away right on sunset. And if you're keen to do a little fishing, there's a fish we catch up here called the barramundi. Now, the barramundi, it fights like a trout on heat. It is one of the best eating fish in Australia. I've got to tell you, it's a great fish. If you want to go on a fishing safari, let us know. Then there's Alice Springs, this little outback town. It was set up as the Overland Telegraph Station. The way to open up a day here is to go up early in darkness and do a hot air balloon flight. As the balloon takes off, you'll see red kangaroos catching the early sun, bouncing through the red dust, and you'll see out across the plains of Australia's interior. It's quite phenomenal to get a feeling for how big Australia is. When you come back, you're probably going to need a little bit of TLC, so why don't we drop into the kangaroo sanctuary where you get a chance to cuddle up with some big red kangaroos. They care for the wildlife here. They try to reintroduce them back into the wild. Some of the kangaroos that perhaps might have been clipped, and the little babies, little joeys, are brought up and reintroduced to the wildlife. And that Overland Telegraph Station I was talking about, this is where the first messages from London would come, this little wire that would come through, a little Morse code reception. So you get a chance to kind of pick up on the history and heritage. Then into the Red Centre, you'll go to the Ayers Rock Resort, where you'll see Uluru. Now, Uluru is taller than the Empire State Building, and it's 5 miles around its base. Think about the size of this thing. And when you're standing here for sundown, as the sun setting, the rock itself would change oranges and reds and purples and blues. If you want a really enjoyable end of the day, go and do a Sound of the Silence dinner. It will start with you going onto a lofty red sand dune, where the haunting sound of didgeridoo will permeate the air. You'll be enjoying lovely champagne and cleansing ales, and you'll have a little canapé. And as the sun's going down, you'll wonder, where am I eating? I can't live on canapés. A chef will arrive. He'll talk to you, introduce you, you'll have a little toast, and you'll follow him down one sand dune, up another, and on the other side, all your tables laid out, all these lovely cloth tables, crockery, cutlery, in a 40 million star restaurant, a fabulous fare, a wonderful insight into outback dining. And then from there, they lay out this beautiful field of light. It's this artist's installation. It's quite spectacular. And you'll do this at the end of your dining experience and walk through. Now, Uluru truly makes the most sense to me at sunrise, because you'll head here at sunrise. You can only imagine that Aboriginal people have been gathering at sunrise at the base of Uluru, watching the first rays of the sun hit this rock as it turns a bright orange. It's like striking a match and watching a match head turn on fire. The rock itself, it will go a bright orange to reds, and we're talking here about 50,000 years of dreamtime lore and legend, which is ascribed into the base of this rock. So we'll do that walk around the back with a local Indigenous guide to have the insights of this art, to go to the Katajuka Cultural Centre and have somebody explain about the food and how they exist, to learn about these people. I mean, the most interesting culture in the world, the Aboriginal people of Australia. And try it, even savour some of the food. Or tucker, see, bush tucker, food, and that on the right-hand side is called a witchetty grub. Now, the witchetty grubs, you can roast them on hot coals. You've got to spit their heads out because they get caught in your teeth. But it's got a real nutty flavour, a bit like bacon and eggs, I kind of figure, but it's really got a nice flavour to it. From there, we head down to Tasmania, our island state of Tasmania, population of 500,000 people, and 250,000 live in Hobart. Now, Hobart itself is very much a wonderful little city. Now, Tassie's got 3 main themes of tourism. They are history and heritage, wilderness and wildlife, and food and wine. And here in Hobart, you get a chance to experience all 3, because Hobart's surrounded by fabulous wilderness. It sits on the Derwent River, and you've got a lot of the buildings here are hand-hewn stone buildings built by convict labour. So there's lovely heritage sitting right before you. You've got fishermen darning their nets. You're walking around the front, and there's some great food here too, some fabulous restaurants. And I've got to say, fish and chips, wandering around here, chatting to the locals. If you're there on a Saturday, the Salamanca markets are just sensational. And there's some of the best markets in all of Australia, without doubt. And so you've got to get in here and do a little shopping and make yourself up a little picnic basket and head out to a place that was truly no picnic, Port Arthur. This is where the convicts were sent. This is where the convicts, or some of the bad convicts, were sent. I mean, Port Arthur was impossible, surrounded by shark-infested waters, and it was tethered. It was joined to the mainland by a very, very thin strip of land called Eagle Hawk Neck, and it was here that savage dogs were held. So it's here you get a chance to learn about the plight of these early convicts. And this whole convict experience, the colonial experience, we see in little towns like Richmond and Ross and Strawn, these little bed and breakfast places, and we'll organise your accommodations, your itinerary. A little self-drive-through here is a lot of fun. In fact, when you're here in Strawn, you can actually leave the car keys alone and hop on a vessel that will take you into the Gordon River, because 1/3 of Tasmania is actually covered in pristine forest. And this forest is just amazing. And through here, the sound, a lot of these boats now too they're using are electric, so you don't even hear the sound of a motor. It's pristine, untouched wilderness and the cleanest air in the world. Just fabulous. And then maybe going up to the alpine region of Cradle Mountain and walking around Dove Lake and keeping your eyes open for some of the wildlife, like our friendly little wombats that just go about their day. They don't care about people. They just kind of wander around. Fabulous. And then coming back to the main lodge and get yourself ready to kind of walk around this lake here to go for dinner. As you're walking around, keep your eyes open because you might see one of those platypus again. Amazing experiences to see wildlife in the wild. And then, of course, the food. The food here, as you've gone into the mill, the cheeses, King Island Breeze, and the beef is so good, it just melts in your mouth. The wines, I mean, truly a wonderful food and wine experience. Couple that with some incredible wildlife interactions. In fact, after you've had a meal here, when you head outside, keep your ears open because you might hear one of these guys. You got any ideas what that is? Yep, that's a Tasmanian devil. Now, the Tassie devil has got a jaw that's pound for pound stronger than a crocodile. It's got a stomach like an acid bath, and they say they can't find any bones in Tasmania because these little guys are like mobile garbage disposal units. They eat the whole thing up. Yeah, quite amazing. You'll see Tassie devils down there. Now, our last state is Queensland, home to the World Heritage Great Barrier Reef. Population, 5 million, and 2.5 million live right in Brisbane. Brisbane, this lovely city on the spectacular Brisbane River. It's surrounded by koalas, an amazing population of koalas, and you can actually visit Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary to get a chance to cuddle koalas. If you're into great wildlife experiences, what about heading across to Tangalooma? Tangalooma is on Moreton Island, the second largest sand island in the world, where you can hand feed wild dolphins. Or if you're interested in surfing and getting down to the beach, head to Surfers Paradise on the Gold Coast. This is where lots of Aussies like to go on vacation. And just running parallel with this is the lovely Gold Coast hinterland, where you get a chance to interact with all sorts of Australian bird life. In fact, there's one bird that David Attenborough said was his favourite bird of all time, and that's the lyrebird. Now, the lyrebird has got an amazing ability to mimic the sound of a car starting, or jackhammers, or it's just incredible. This bird to follow these guys through here is just phenomenal. And if you're interested in wildlife, then going to Australia Zoo. I mean, let's face it, Stephen Terry Irwin did a marvellous job of definitely putting Australia's wildlife on the map, and to head up here and see that legacy, to go and see Terry and Bindi and young Rob and go and get a feel for the wildlife here at the Australia Zoo. It's truly quite, what they're doing for preserving wildlife is definitely outstanding. Now, north of there is Noosa. This is where a lot of Aussies like to go on vacation. It's like our Riviera, and there's a beautiful wetland area here with over 400 different species of birds, and some great surfing. And I mean, Noosa's a spot where a lot of Aussies go on vacation. North of there, you've got Hervey Bay. The Hervey Bay is known for the whale watching because the actual bay is protected by an island as well. It's the biggest sand island in the world called Fraser Island. And you can head out to Fraser Island, you can do some whale watching as you cruise out there, and you can stay at a place called Kingfisher Bay Resort. Now, the island itself, surrounded by salt water and nothing but sand, is actually home to some amazing wildlife experiences, incredible bush as you see here, and you can head out on a four-wheel drive and head out to Lake Mackenzie. The water here is crystal clear. It actually filters through sand and comes up up here, surrounded by melaleuca trees, paper bark, and the water is so crystal clear. It's also here where you'll see the most pure strain of Australian dingo are found through here. The lovely sandy brown coloured dingoes are found on Fraser Island. Then there's a lovely area called Whitsundays, and a collective of islands through this region, Hamilton Island being a very important one because that's where you can land your plane. Hamilton Island has everything from 3-star up to 5-star accommodation. In fact, the luxury accommodation of Qualia, which provides fabulous location to kind of use as a nice finish to the vacation, perhaps. You can use this as your base to head out to Whitehaven Beach, which has been voted one of the #1 beaches in the whole world. It sands like a fine silica powder. And you can go out to the beautiful heart-shaped reef for a romantic rendezvous with your partner should you be looking at doing a little honeymoon. It's a good spot to be. Or if you're looking for true romance, then perhaps a little trip out to Hayman Island. This is actually your check-in facility. When you board this launch, your luggage disappears. You'll sign a little registration card and you'll be given champagne. You'll arrive at the resort and show into your room. Your luggage will magically reappear, and that will be the start of your vacation at the Intercon on Hayman Island. Going north of there, you've got Cairns. Now, Cairns is a great gateway. Here I said that. It's pronounced Cairns, like a beer can. So you hold your nose and go, Cairns, Cairns. Can you do that? Well done. Cairns is where the Great Barrier Reef collides with the Daintree Wilderness Rainforest. These are two wild wilderness areas that are just phenomenal. And when you're here, you want to drop in and see a mate of mine, Craig. I used to work with Craig in Mount Buller, and Craig was the chef there, and he's just fabulous what he does. He's taken indigenous foods and he's brought it together with a more contemporary Australian cuisine, and he's created this fabulous food that mixes the two together. So if you want a chance to really savour good food in a great location right there on the waterfront, then definitely drop into the Ochre restaurant. From here, you can head out and go and visit the Great Barrier Reef. Now, it's an hour and a half to get out, but once you're out there, you've got semi-submersibles, glass-bottom boats, all sorts of water activities. You can go snorkeling and diving. It's just a fabulous experience. Then you've got the Kuranda Railway. Now, that runs through about a dozen hand-hewn tunnels up past spectacular waterfalls in season, up to the town of Kuranda. Now, Kuranda used to be a haven for hippies back in the 60s. They've become capitalists now. They're selling some great souvenirs, so you can do some shopping, meet up with the army ducks at a place called Rainforestation. They were left over from the Second World War. And a chance to actually meet up also with the Palmagiri Aborigines and maybe experience some of the wildlife here, like very rare tree kangaroos are found up through here. And take a personal guide, an local Aboriginal guide who will take you through the rainforest to sacred areas, to take in the incredible forest. This is the World Heritage Daintree Rainforest, and also get a chance to see some of the amazing bird life found up through here, like the cassowary, the second largest bird in Australia. Now, you can stay up here. You can stay at a place like Silky Oaks, which is just beautiful, tucked in on stilts into the rainforest. You can actually couple that experience and spend a few nights at Silky and then maybe go and stay out on the Great Barrier Reef. You can stay in two World Heritage areas side by side. Lizard Island is what I'm thinking about, and this island truly is a paradise unto its own. Now, I've got to say, I've kind of covered Australia, and I've covered, of course, in this exercise as much as I possibly could in 45 minutes. I hope you're ready to pack your bags, but if not, I'm here to answer any questions you might have. So on the right-hand side, if you've got some questions, I'm going to open up the box, and I'm going to answer those questions now. I've got a question here, actually, right to start me off. Thank you very much. It's actually with regards to the exchange rate. What's the exchange rate like? Well, it's actually pretty good right now. It's about 65 cents to the dollar. So your money's going to go a long way. The other thing I want to point out too, with regards to currency, is the fact that you don't, as far as because somebody's asked you about the food being expensive. Well, the thing you've got to take into account is that you don't have to tip in Australia. So you're not adding 18 to 20% on top of your bill. I mean, you could be out with a group of 6 people having a fabulous meal, and the milk, the price might be like $400, but you don't have to kind of add 20% to that. No, you can just leave them $10, and that's all the waiter would expect. Tipping is something you do just to show appreciation. When somebody's really jumped out of the bag and done a great job, then you do that. Otherwise, they get paid well. So not necessary. Not necessary at all. As far as Lord Howe Island, Holly is asking about Lord Howe. Absolutely, Holly. Lord Howe is like the southernmost island and reef. In fact, it's out of New South Wales, so you can fly from either Sydney or Brisbane. It's only a couple of hours, and there's a Capella Lodge on Lord Howe. I call it, it's like Australia's Bora Bora. And for those that know Bora Bora or Tahiti, that's what we're talking about, Lord Howe rather. So yes, absolutely. If you now somebody wanting to if you wanted to avoid the long, I'm going to tell you that plane flight, you can break the journey up. You can do the islands on the way through. You could go to Tahiti, you could go to Fiji, you could go to the Cook Islands, you can go to Hawaii, and you could hop on the islands through. But I've got to tell you, I've been doing this now for 30 years. And I've taken the Denver Broncos, the San Diego Chargers. I took 400 fans down back in 1999. I've taken in 2014, I took the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers down. I took like 400 out of Denver down for that, out of Phoenix for that. And everybody always says to me, "Oh, Jeff, the flight's going to be such a long flight." Everybody, bar none, when they get there, go, "Wow, it wasn't that bad after all." Because the airlines do such a great job. And I believe that you do the big journey first and then you work your way back. So if you're planning on breaking the journey, don't break the journey going down to Australia. Break the journey on the way home. That's the time to do it. Because you find you won't get jet lag going down. Because you're actually going, it's a very natural flight. You're leaving late in the evening, so like at 11 o'clock at night. And so it's very natural for the body wanting to sleep, especially after the lovely meal they serve you, a couple of glasses of vino, thank you very much. Before you know it, you've watched a movie and you're snoozing off. Coming back, though, it's a different story. And so, therefore, I think coming back is the time you should break the journey. So, look, there's lots of questions here I can't get to right now. Are there any tours that emphasise history? Betty, yes. We can put itineraries together that will encompass the history and heritage of Australia. It truly is fascinating. And there's stories that I haven't even covered now. Like, do you realise back in the 1850s when the gold rush collapsed in California, the biggest gold rush in the world was just outside of Melbourne in Victoria. And there was a place called Ballarat. And at the time, Melbourne was the richest city in the world. And a lot of Americans came down from the goldfields of California, went down to mine and look for gold in Australia. So, I mean, there's lots of great stories. In fact, the oldest baseball clubs outside of the USA are in Australia because a lot of those miners took their leather gloves and their baseball bats and they actually established the baseball clubs back in the 1870s, 1880s. Yes. Look, there's so many great, interesting stories, and there's so much to be told. I can't cover it all right now, and I do want to kind of press on because I'm going to go through. As our travel advisors, we're going to get your questions. We're going to all come back to you now with some answers. I hope you've enjoyed this Australia virtual vacation, and the first people you should thank and you should send an email to is the travel advisor that invited you. Whether you got an invitation personally or you saw something on Facebook, please let our travel advisors know they're on the right track. They came up with this idea. They figured that people are trapped at home right now. They can't get out because of this virus. They figured, well, let's give them an opportunity to kind of live a virtual vacation through Australia and discover the wonder of Down Under. I hope you've felt that in this presentation, that I provided you with some of that wonder. In fact, we've decided we're going to add on and we're going to go back to Queensland because there's so much we haven't uncovered. So on May the 7th, we're going to go back down to Australia. We're going to go into Queensland and we're going to open up Queensland. Queensland's got so many moving parts. I think you'll find this truly informative and amazing. So if you've enjoyed today, definitely come back and join us on May the 7th. We're then going to follow up with New Zealand on the 14th. And New Zealand, of course, does couple nicely with Australia. A lot of people will do a vacation where they'll do Australia and New Zealand combined. I can tell you that New Zealand has enough to do on its own. And it's a great driving destination. You're going to really enjoy the New Zealand presentations. I take you through multiculture. I take you through New Zealand. Do you realise that New Zealand is the youngest country in the world? It's the last place settled by human beings. Yeah. And because of that, they don't have the same conflict. They don't have the same history of conflict and religious wars and so on. But Kiwis are honestly so free-thinking. New Zealand's like the way the world used to be. Another thing about New Zealand, it's interesting, New Zealand didn't have any animals before humans arrived. It only had birds. So for some great experience, I'm sure you'll enjoy my New Zealand presentation. Then I'm going to take you on some safaris. I'm going to take you to East Africa for a virtual vacation in planning a safari through Kenya and Tanzania. And then we're going to couple up that with a trip down to South Africa for a virtual vacation through South Africa. So the adventure will continue. So if you're interested, if this sounds like it's interesting for you and you'd love to join us, we'd love to have you. Please let and thank your travel advisors. I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation on Australia. And I thank you very much for the time you've given us and you've committed to us. We're going to follow up right now. I wish you all the very, very best. And I'm looking forward to talking to our travel advisors and hearing your stories too and what your interests might be. Now's the time to start planning. Remember, the fun is at the planning, so call a travel advisor and let the fun begin. Here's cheers and bye for now.